All right, this is our fourth and hopefully last plant evolution podcast. We are now talking about the non-flowering seed plants. If you can remember the diagram I made before the last podcast where we drew the funky pitchfork, okay, and here was our ancient common ancestor. Here's the common ancestor to the algae, the green algae. Well, that's spelled well. And the moss. And now we see the adaptations made by the moss to become the seedless vascular plants, like the ferns. And now we're going to see the next evolutionary branch up, and that is to this group, the non-flowering seed plants. We don't make flowers, but we do manage to make seeds, which is a big improvement over spores. Okay, so the moss improvement was cuticle, stomata, spores, little root-like structures that could get into the soil. The seedless vascular plant, big step, was vascular tissue, and the dominant sporophyte generation. And now we're going to see the evolution of seeds and also another structure, pollen. Okay, so that's what we're looking at in this group. Okay. Another term for the non-flowering seed plants is the gymnosperms. They are also referred to as naked seed plants because the seeds are not contained in a fruit. So in these plants there is no fruit. Seeds are not in a fruit. They are naked. In fact, they are on the highly modified leaves of structures that we call cones. So immediately what should come to mind are trees like pine trees that form cones. That is who is in this group. Now, what's up with a seed? Well, the first thing you need to know about a seed is that seeds are better. Better than what? Better than spores. That's what. A spore is one cell big. It has a little protective coat. That's good. And they're pretty good. I mean, they've been successful. But seeds are better for dispersing your babies over wide areas. Why? Why are seeds better for dispersing your babies? Well, first of all, we're going to let the baby plant get to be bigger than just one little tiny cell. One little cell is a pretty fragile thing. We're going to let it grow into an embryo that's made of many cells. It'll still be small by our standards, contained inside the seed, but it will be many cells and will stand a better chance at life starting out that way before it is allowed to leave the parent plant. It also is chock full of food storage tissue. Food storage tissue. Mommy loves the baby so much that she not only lets him grow before he leaves home, but she packs him a lunch to take with him. And this lunch consists of starch, which is in a tissue that we call endosperm. If you hear endosperm or starch, they're pretty much the same thing. Okay. She also loves him so much that she gives him a little house. She protects him in a little seed coat, a protective covering that is going to keep him safe in bad conditions. And it's way better than anything that a spore has got. This is so much more likely to survive than a spore. And that's the big evolutionary adaptation here. Okay? Here we are seeing inside a seed, this little thing right here is the baby plant. This here is lunch. This is the starch or endosperm, basically the same thing. And this, of course, on the outside would be the seed coat. Okay, very protective, hard, durable. So, protect the baby plant. That's one advantage of a seed. Provide the baby with stored food. Allow it to mature before we're going to expose it to the environment. Much better chance of survival than one little haploid spore cell. Okay? But, of course, the other flip of that is there's more investment from the parent, too. The parent has to put in a lot more energy into this kind of seed than it does into making a spore. So it's costly energetically for the parent, but it must be a decent trade-off. It must be so much more likely to survive that natural selection has favored this, even though it is more costly for the parent to make it. All right, another big advance of the seed plants over their seedless ancestors is that we're going to get away from water for good. We do not need water for fertilization because now we have pollen. Pollen is really a cell that is going to carry sperm through the air by wind, or in later plants by means of a pollinator that will carry it. So the ova are going to be protected in the female tissue, and we're really not going to see the female gametophyte containing the eggs. We're not going to see it. It's not going to be apparent to us. It's going to be so hidden in the female in the plant, in the sporophyte. But you see pollen all the time. It likes to cover your car in the springtime weather. This pollen contains the sperm. The pollen is really the male gametophyte, but look, it's been reduced to like 3 cells. It's very tiny, but it is able to be airborne and fly around. Okay, so pollen grains are really tiny. They carry the sperm inside them. Okay, wind is the medium in which they travel, not water. Okay. Later on in the flowering plants we will see pollinators take a role, but in the gymnosperms it's all wind. Okay? Now, most common example, there are several examples still, but the most common one is division coniferophyta, or the conifers, the cone plants, evergreens like pines, spruce, fir. The reproductive structures you can see here, these are little cones here growing on this end of this tree. They are typically evergreen, which means they keep their leaves all year. They will lose their leaves gradually over the course of the year and grow new ones. The leaves are very needle-like, and that's helpful in reducing water loss because they never lose their leaves. They've got to the reason deciduous trees lose their leaves is because in winter, if the ground freezes, they can't get water out of the ground, and they would lose tons through those big, broad leaves. So this kind of reduces water loss for a pine who doesn't lose his leaves in the winter when the ground might freeze. Also, the cuticle is extra thick, and that helps prevent water loss as well. All right. These non-flowering seed plants, these gymnosperms, these conifers, these pines, are similar to ferns because they're vascular. The sporophyte is big, but they are different from ferns. So these are two similarities, okay, but they are different from ferns because they have seeds, which is much, much better than spores, and they have pollen instead of swimming sperm, and that both of these are huge adaptations. Okay? Now, in our next group, the flowering seed plants, please remember our little pitchfork here. Okay? We've got our green algae, we've got our mosses, we've got our ferns, we've got our pines or our gymnosperms, our non-flowering seed plants, and now we're going to have one final leg of evolutionary change, and this is to the flowering plants, okay, which is the angiosperms. They are the dominant plant form alive on our planet today. If you look outside, if it's not a pine tree or a moss or a fern, it is probably a flowering plant. And you're like, wait a minute, trees don't make flowers. Oak trees don't. Yes, they do. We just don't usually notice them. Grass make flowers. We just don't normally notice them. Okay? Usually we cut the grass before it makes the flowers. So, at any rate, remember that evolution, and we're going to see what our step is here. All right, there is one major division. All flowering plants on Earth belong to the division Anthophyta. They are extremely successful, and they are the most advanced group we have on Earth today, meaning they have the greatest number of adaptations to land. They have all the same adaptations that mosses had, ferns had, that the pines have, and then they add to those What are they going to add to them? Fruits and flowers. Okay? Alright, so characteristics of angiosperms. They have seeds, which we've already discussed. Those seeds are made inside of an ovary. We're going to talk about that in a bit. It allows more protection, and these ovaries protected inside flowers, which of course flowers is a big advance, allow attraction of insects, birds, pollinators to the plant. Okay? Please be aware of how much better that is in terms of not being wasteful. Windblown pollen is trying to fertilize my car. That's not going to work. But when you have a bee that is carrying your pollen for you, that bee is not going to try to land on my car. He's going to go to another flower, another flower, another flower, and you're much more likely to get your pollen where you want it to go. Less waste, more precise. Another big advance is the fruits. These are going to develop from the ovaries, okay, and they're going to contain the seeds that are going to allow, hopefully, for the dispersal of those seeds away from the parent plant. We don't want the kid to stay home and grow right under the feet of the parent. That's going to be competition. We want that baby to get far away. So the fruit is there to entice animals to eat the fruit and then eat the seeds and carry them off and deposit them elsewhere, farther away, or perhaps the fruit can be modified so it clings in an animal's hair and is carried away that way. There are all kinds of fruits. In this sense, a fruit is not always something we would want to eat necessarily. It's something that contains seeds. Okay? All right, there are two main classes. There are monocots and dicots, and I will try to explain to you some of the characteristics for each of those. Some examples of flowering plants. I'm going to stop here. We will do a little flower dissection that I will show you on we don't need that, on a little video separately. And at any rate, we'll stop there. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next segment.